Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to talk about Batman Road to No Man's Land, Volume 2. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to be talking about Road to No Man's Land, Volume 2. This is the Batman trade paperback collection. But before we get into the review, I want to ask you to please do one thing. Please subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, lets you know when I drop new videos, all that good stuff. Now, Road to No Man's Land, Volume 1, I raved about. I have a review up on the channel. You can go check that out. It is a fantastic, fantastic read, especially as a follow-up to the Cataclysm story. Now, these are like out-of-print trades, but they are all available, I guess, digitally on Comixology if you want to check them out that way, or if you can hunt them down, you will probably pay over cover price, or if you have a lucky comic shop that still has this stuff, you could pay cover price. But Cataclysm and Road to No Man's Land Volume 1 and Volume 2 are all collected in the recently released Road to No Man's Land Omnibus. Now, as fantastic as Road to No Man's Land Volume 1 was, as like a extension of the Cataclysm storyline, which I loved because it's putting Batman in new situations, Road to No Man's Land Volume 2, and we'll probably just say Volume 2 from here on out because that's a mouthful, does kind of like a swift decline from the quality of stories that you got in Volume 1. So where Volume 1 kind of had this, like, you know, they were all kind of self-contained and you never really moved anything along, Road to No Man's Land kind of pushes all that aside, and I don't know if this was just like a planned thing, if editorial actually said, like, you know what, we're going to do self-contained stories, maybe a couple of two-parters, but not a ton, and then when we get to the latter half, when we start, you know, calling it, because this is when they had the Road to No Man's Land banner on the sides of the cover. Volume 1, their covers say Aftershock. So, in terms of like trade paperbacks, I guess that's why it's Volume 1 and Volume 2, even though Volume 1 should really be called like Aftershock, because that's what's on all the covers in here on the banner. But this actually sets up like not really why Gotham was kind of abandoned. The reason is very arbitrary. It's very political. What it mainly does is introduce Nicholas Scratch, because Nicholas Scratch is the guy who's kind of puppeteering and trying to get everything behind the scenes to become his way. What's weird about it, and I have read No Man's Land before, not this particular storyline. I've read Cataclysm and the No Man's Land in the original trade paperbacks from like 2001 or something like that, a long, long time ago, before they got collected in these versions. This contains the Azrael stories, and I've never read anything in this one before. As a big Azrael fan, haven't read all of his solo series, the original run. So it kicks off with an issue of Azrael, number 47, which is this one, and it kind of introduces Nicholas Scratch, and Batman asks Azrael to please go, you know, not hunt down Nicholas Scratch, but stop him from murdering some senator, you know, and that's kind of what happens in that issue and the next. So this book contains Azrael 47 through 50. So they do like 2 issues here and then 2 issues at the bookend. And that happens a lot in this book. There's multiple storylines that are collected in here that all have the Road to No Man's Land banner on the covers, right? You've got issues of Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, and Azrael, right? And all of them have like 4 issues in here. But they tend to like split them up. So Batman has the like Bruce Wayne goes to Washington storyline. That's I think like 3 or 4 issues, and the first 2 chunks are after that first chunk of Azrael, and that's when Bruce is going to Washington and talking to people and trying to get the government to pay up money to help subsidize the reconstruction of Gotham, because it's not something that insurance or Bruce Wayne alone can fund, right? That's kind of cut in half, and then you switch over to Detective Comics, and then you see Nightwing and Robin doing their stuff, going against Mr. Scratch's, you know, henchmen or whatever. And then you cut back to Batman, and then you cut back to Azrael, who's trying to not kill, but stop Nicholas Scratch from doing more things. And the weird part about reading this is instead of like pepper them in like one issue of this, one issue of this, one issue of this, one issue of this, instead of also doing something where they like chunkify everything and just do, all right, here's all the Azrael issues, here's all the Batman, all the Detective Comics stuff, they split it in half, and that makes for a disjointed reading experience. So the only storyline in here that's collected all together as one big chunk is the Shadow of the Bat storyline, which is drawn by Mark Buckingham, who's done Fables and other stuff before then. He's doing still the same like Kelly Jones inspired stuff he was doing in Volume 1 that I'd talked about and really, really liked. However, the storyline is just, it's Jeremiah Arkham talking to the Arkham inmates and trying to keep order in Arkham. And then at the end of the story, he kind of just gives up, right? So there's no Batman characters, it's just the inmates. And while normally you'd think that could be a strong storyline, for me, just focusing on a bunch of Batman villains in Arkham Asylum never really works for me. It's not my thing. I know that other people really enjoy those types of stories, but for me, you gotta sprinkle a little bit of Batman in there. Like, I'm more interested when Batman or Robin or Nightwing's in it, but if you just take all the main heroes out of it, I'm not that interested unless you've got a really interesting take like Harleen, for example, even though that has a sprinkling of Batman. So that's the only, that's like 3 or 4 issues. It's this big chunk of the book right here that happens. So what you lose here is instead of reading issue 1 of this storyline, issue 1 of the second storyline, issue 1 of the third, and so on and so forth, is the timing is all off. So events will happen in the Bruce Goes to Washington storyline, right? And then you'll go into the next chunk of the next storyline, and you'll be before what you had just read in the book. So the mapping is kind of way off. I think I would have preferred if they'd just done 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or I don't know if like reading all the storyline in one big chunk, here's all of Batman, here's all of Detective, here's all of Azrael. I don't know if that would have been satisfying either, but the way that they did it, I think they tried to split the difference. It did not really work as a reading experience here. So that's what I mean when I'm saying like I don't give this a 2 thumbs up, even though it does have the real meat of the Road to No Man's Land title, just because it's not as a good reading experience as the Volume 1 is. But again, this is dealing with heroes and saving people and just the nitty-gritty of being a hero day to day in a unsurmountable, unstoppable, Sisyphusian task, whereas this one kind of moves away from that and gets into some politics, and it's just not as well written, or maybe because it's not such great stakes as Volume 1, you lose that type of gravitas and stuff like that. And the way that everything's kind of like chunked together doesn't help itself either. So, that's why I'm not really giving this my full recommendation. I think it's fun, but again, I would say, if there was one to skip, it might be this one. Or I might say, just go read the Bruce Goes to Washington storyline and maybe the Azrael stuff. So, yeah, I think the Azrael stuff is in here because maybe they realized that, if they're going to collect Road to No Man's Land, you have to introduce Nicholas Scratch because he's the guy pulling the strings. What's weird, though, is that Nicholas Scratch never really appears in other Batman titles. I don't know if he does in the new No Man's Land collections. I know the ones that I read long ago, he was not in it at all. So I think he gets relegated to the Azrael issues because I think he becomes like an Azrael villain or something. So it's weird, I guess, because they introduced him in Azrael 47, he kind of stays there. He does show up a little bit in the Detective Comics stuff with Robin and Nightwing, but he's never really like in the forefront. And even from what I can remember of reading the original No Man's Land collections, which did not include any Azrael issues, he wasn't present there at all. So if he stays in the Azrael books, maybe that's why they put the Azrael books in these new collections, because they were never collected before, and that has the Nicholas Scratch storyline, who kind of kicked off the idea of abandoning Gotham for the United States. So that's kind of a weird little puzzle, is if this guy's going to be a major player, why was he relegated to the Azrael book as a villain? So it's kind of weird. As far as the writer and artist go, you've got great artists. You got, what's his face? Jim Aparo is still back, even though he had apparently retired way back in like Batman 500 was his big retirement, or like he was leaving the Bat books for a while, but he never goes very far because he's still drawing here in the late 90s and doing a phenomenal job. You've got David Roach on inks. There's something about whoever's inking Jim Aparo, like there's something unmistakably the same every single time. Like I don't know if you can have a bad inker on Jim Aparo artwork. If you like his artwork, that is. I think he comes off a little flat sometimes. It's very classic, very 70s. And in the 90s and as we push into like the modern era, I don't think it works as well. You got Mark Buckingham doing this, you know, the Arkham Asylum stuff I talked about before, which I think is okay. And he's doing his weird Mark Buckingham border stuff that he did all across Fables. This isn't as fancy as some of those, but, you know, it is what it is. I don't remember seeing any Graham Nolan in this book, so maybe he was taking a break. You do have Roger Robinson doing the Azrael stuff, who is, I think, a really phenomenal artist. Just I don't know what happened to him or where he went or why he didn't break big, but I always enjoyed seeing his stuff on Azrael, and he does a good job here as well. So you've got Denny O'Neil, you've got Chuck Dixon all over this book. You've got Alan Grant is in here. And I think that's it. Kelly Puckett does a little bit in the Batman Chronicles story, which I don't know why that was included. The other weird thing about this trade paperback, and I'm not sure when this came out, but if it did come out at the beginning of the No Man's Land storyline, I have no idea why. So this is the Secret Files and Origins. That's Azrael's new costume over here. And I remember having this issue as a single issue, and I read it. But I don't remember if this came out. This says December 99. I don't know if that came out at the beginning of the storyline. It doesn't make sense because the end of the thing, there's like a timeline, which basically goes through all the events of No Man's Land. So if this did indeed, in fact, come out before No Man's Land, like you're just giving away all of your stories. I think it came out in the middle of No Man's Land, but I don't know why they put it in here at all. Like, there's stuff in here about Poison Ivy, when they do, like, the secret file of Poison Ivy, stuff that she does, you know, in No Man's Land with Clayface, which is one of my favorite storylines. They introduced David Kane and Batgirl, and Batgirl had not even been introduced by the time this book was coming out. Like, she makes her first appearance in the No Man's Land storyline, so to have a whole file on her and say when this was coming out, I don't like. This is just a weird place to put the secret files. If you've never read No Man's Land before, I don't recommend reading it right in this trade. I would come back to it maybe in the middle or something like that, or maybe at the end, if you like that sort of thing. But yeah, and there's just the outside forces. You know, it's telling you that Bane's coming in at the end of No Man's Land, and you know, this guy up here, I know who he is. If you're a fan of Superman villains, you might know who he is as well. So it's just really weird that to put it at the end of Road to No Man's Land Volume 2 instead of in the middle of one of the No Man's Land trades. So I don't know. There you have it, my review of Road to No Man's Land Volume 2. I'm looking forward to jumping into the actual big event, No Man's Land. There are 4 volumes, and we will do reviews as we go and read each volume. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know down below if your favorite event is No Man's Land, like it's one of my favorite Batman events. It's phenomenal. I love it, and I can't wait to read more. So we will see you guys next time here in the Funny Pages.